On today's episode, we're going to talk about 4 specific models that I'm going to put on my current Mount Rushmore of fishing rods. These rods range in price from $120 to $600 to cover a wide variety of budgets, as well as handling a wide variety of techniques, from finesse to frog fishing and everything in between. All of that and more in this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. As always, we are brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. And folks, if you are not checking American Legacy Fishing's website at least once a week, chances are you are missing out on some killer sales without even knowing about it. American Legacy Fishing is notorious for just going on the website and looking and being like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that these 7 things were now, 20% off or being run on big sales that, again, didn't even know about until I checked the website. Because we're a weekly show and people listen to a whole bunch of different times, we don't always want to give you guys information that may or may not be correct by the day that you're actually listening to this, but this is why I can't preach enough. Just put it in your Rolodex of websites. When you get up in the morning and you check Facebook, you check Twitter, you check your email, you check whatever, check ALF, because you never know what those guys are going to put on sale on any given day. And aside from those great deals, they also have an amazing selection of used gear that's constantly being updated that you want to make sure you keep your eye out for those gems that go on there and they might be gone way too soon. You never even knew they were on the website. Just make a habit of checking that website often, because otherwise you are missing out on savings and great opportunities to get the fishing gear that you want at the best prices on the internet. All of that from great folks that have super fast shipping. They have great customer service. The amount of screenshots and, text messages and stuff I've gotten of people who have just been overwhelmed by the service that they've experienced from American Legacy Fishing is really what makes this whole thing worth it. They're great folks. I promise you they will bend over backwards to make sure they are providing you with the best service and the best gear possible. I've seen them do it time and time again, and they have no plans of stopping anytime soon. So check them out over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. And as always, you can use code TACKLETALK5. That's going to save you even more money off their already great everyday pricing and surprise sales that they run at any given time. That code TACKLETALK5 is stackable. So if something's on sale, doesn't matter, you should be able to use code TACKLETALK5 for an additional 5% savings. So all of that, again, over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. Okay, folks, the first thing I want to say here today, again, is a huge thank you to everybody that has ordered off the website some of the new gear that we recently put up there last week. The response was awesome. I have spent the past, 3, 4, 5 days in my spare room and studio here just packaging up orders to get them out to you all in a timely fashion. So if you've ordered anything up to this point, up to today, that either has already arrived to you or it is in the mail as we speak, has been dropped off at the post office and is en route. So again, we appreciate you all. If you haven't got your order in yet, you haven't missed out yet. Nothing is completely sold out, but we are getting low on a lot of things. So like the coffee mugs with the largemouth and the smallmouth on them that says Tackle Talk Podcast right underneath. A really cool design that we made a couple years ago. Those mugs are getting very low. If you want one of those mugs, I would probably go and order those as soon as possible on the website. The shirts have also been flying off the shelf here, but I did over order on those, so we still have a bunch of those left. Thank goodness I learned my lesson the last time. So I still have plenty of shirts in every size from medium to 2XL that you can go over on the website. We also have that discount bundle that gets you a shirt, a mug, a smallmouth keychain, 3 Give 'em the Beans wristbands, decals, a signed card, and more over on the website that you can check out as well. Again, www.tackletalkpodcast.com/store. And you can go check all that out or just go to our website and click store at the top of the page. But again, just a huge thank you. That helps us, obviously, here at Tackle Talk. We try not to shove a ton of sponsors down your throat and a ton of ads down your throat and all of that type of stuff. This really helps us just kind of pay for everything that goes into the Tackle Talk podcast. So I appreciate you guys. Okay, folks, next up here, really quick pro fishing update. Bassmaster just wrapped up their second Elite Series event of the year at Lake Okeechobee in Florida, and boy, did it have some fireworks. So let's start with your top 10 in reverse order. 10th place, Jason Christie. 9th place, Jacob Fouts. 8th went to Trey McKinney. 7th, Greg DePalma. 6th place, David Gaston. 5th place, Bob Downey. 4th went to Will Davis Jr. 3rd, Koya Fujita. 2nd went to John Garrett. And 1st place, the prodigy himself, Brandon Palaniuk. So first off, congratulations to Brandon Palaniuk as he wins yet another Bassmaster Elite Series event, padding his already stellar career. He's a 2-time Angler of the Year. He's a 2-time Bass Nation champion, just continuing to build a Hall of Fame resume. But I'm going to say that there were 3 real storylines that you should probably know from this event. The first was that this event was basically won on day 2 out of the 4 days, because on Friday, way before semifinal Saturday or championship Sunday, Brandon Palaniuk all but won this thing with an all-time record-breaking day. Brandon caught 2 fish over 9 pounds. He caught 1 over 7 pounds. It was magic. It was crazy to watch, and I just want to let you hear how his day ended.
34 pounds, 10 ounces, 34.10, and with 58 pounds and an ounce, the prodigy is leading the Champion Power Equipment Bassmaster Elite on Lake Okeechobee. Boom, boom, double guns loaded, and Palaniuk shoots the lights out here on day number 2. You just witnessed history with 34 pounds, 10 ounces. Previous to this, the biggest ever limit was weighed in by Ish Monroe, the BBS, with 34 pounds and 5 ounces. This is the biggest limit. Wow, 34.10, a new record. Oh boy.
So, yeah, there you go. Brandon Palaniuk weighs in 34 pounds and 10 ounces in one single day. The biggest bag in Elite Series history for Lake Okeechobee, beating out Ish Monroe's old record. Just a mind-boggling bag of fish. 2 fish over 9, 1 over 7, 2 really nice other fish. Just an all-time performance on Friday alone. And at this event, it was Brandon Palaniuk in a big community hole where there were like 3 or 4 other anglers from the first day even that were all basically just fishing on top of each other. And I'm not just talking kind of close, I'm talking the boats were almost touching. That's how small this sort of area in this community hole was that they were sharing. And if I remember right, I think it was Brandon Palaniuk, it was Greg DePalma, Will Davis Jr., and then I think either like Kung or Williams, someone else was in there too, I can't remember, but a true crowd all fishing the same spot together, and BP just kind of waxed the floor with everybody else, especially when it came to day 2. Day 1, Greg DePalma got the best of that whole group. Day 2 and on, it was the Brandon Palaniuk show. But he caused quite a bit of commotion on the bait side of things as well, because he was very visibly throwing a few well-known megabass baits and then one that's not so well-known. So I know he was using a Katana jerkbait, I think. He was using a Big M crankbait for a lot of the time, and then one of those was a prototype crankbait from Megabass. And at my last check, I think the Big M was basically completely sold out already because, well, when you catch like 2 9+ pounders on live TV, it tends to sell some baits sometimes. And then after some sleuthing, he mentioned that one of the other crankbaits that he was throwing, and you could see it in photos and you could see it in video while you're watching him out there, he said that it was a prototype bait from Megabass, and it just kind of looked like it had sort of like a hand-painted crappie pattern on it, and it looked like it probably was a like 10-ish foot diving crankbait, almost like a DT style body, just a little fatter belly down there. And the internet went to work, and it looks like it's most likely a new bait from Megabass that they debuted back in Japan pretty recently at one of the recent shows, and it looks like it's called an IPX12. That's what we're going to go with for now. That's the best I can find. A few different people sent me photos that kind of corroborate that assumption. A new unreleased crank that looks like it might be called the IPX12 from Megabass was also a star of the show here. Second was just another mind-blowing single fish as David Gaston caught an 11-pound 8-ounce largemouth on day 2, which just ended up being one of the biggest bass ever weighed in an Elite Series event. It was the biggest bass ever weighed in at an Elite event at Okeechobee. Just an absolute unit of a fish. And if you like big fish, that fish, along with like BP's 2 9s and a bunch of other really good fish, this was your event if you just like big Florida fish catches. And then third was, of course, that before this event even started, the overwhelming favorite getting ready to fish the Elite Series event here on his home pond after easily winning the Open on this same body of water last year, the hometown hammer, Scott Martin, was disqualified before this event even took off. So Scott turned himself in, it sounds like, on an information rule violation. Apparently, I guess he was talking water clarity or asking water clarity questions of somebody just during, I guess, like a normal conversation at, a bait shop or among friends or something. I don't know. But something that was evidently a violation of that information rule. And I'm not sure all the details because I didn't watch all the breakdowns or the drama side of things on this one. Regardless of what happened or didn't happen or whether it was the correct punishment or not, I don't know. All I know is that it sucks that the hometown favorite was DQ'd before the event even begins. One less storyline that we get to watch throughout these 4 days. But again, giant congratulations to Brandon Polnick. You'll love to see it. One of the fan favorites in the sport. BP gets it done on Lake Okeechobee. Okay, everybody. Next up here on today's show, we are going to have a little bit of fun, and we're going to go out on a limb a little bit, and we're going to make some bold claims and maybe even ruffle a few feathers here and there. But today, we are going to broach a topic that I have wanted to do for a long time, and we are going to discuss the 4 rods that I would put on my personal Mount Rushmore of fishing rods. So let's start by laying some ground rules here because that is a big task to do. So when I made this list, I didn't just want this to be a list of $800 fishing rods that are out of everybody's price range. That's silly. That doesn't help anybody that's listening to the show. I would say 80 to 90% of you, that would just be like a pointless show because you're not going to be able to afford, $700, $800 fishing rods all over the place. I understand that. I can't afford that either. So I wanted to make sure to spread it out in terms of budget first and foremost. So this list of 4 rods that I have on my Mount Rushmore today, I would call one of those 4 a bougie or very expensive rod. I would call 2 of those rods very middle of the road, nice tournament ready rods. And then I would call one of these 4 rods an actual budget rod. So coming in well under $150 to round out our 4 here. So I wanted to make that a big focus today so that this list of 4 rods hits pretty much everybody listening. That was first and foremost. Second, I wanted to make sure that this is a Mount Rushmore of specific rods. That means length, power, action, brand, model, a specific rod, a specific SKU from a company that you can go online right now and you can purchase from your favorite retailer. Not just a listing of brands or a listing of rod families under a brand. So if we're going to pick a Dobbins rod, I'm not going to say, number 1 on this list is the Dobbins, Champion Extreme. That's not specific enough. We would say this is a Dobbins 744C, right? A very specific rod with a specific length and action and taper and all that kind of stuff. So that was second. Third, I wanted the diversity of techniques to be evident here. I don't want this to be a list of 4 rods that are 7'3", medium heavy, fast casting rods. I wanted 4 rods that can do a lot of different things to round out this Mount Rushmore. So I wanted a frogging rod. I want finesse. I want topwater. I want crankbaits. I want to be able to do a lot with these 4 rods, not just 4 rods that do the same thing from 4 different companies. And last year, I wanted these rods to be rods that I have a lot of personal experience with versus rods that I've just felt once or twice. That's important to me because I'll be honest, I use a lot of rods, but I use them very briefly, and then I just get kind of a feel for them. And then the rods that I'm really impressed with, those are the rods that I really, go out and use for 6 months, 8 months at a time versus these rods that I take out once or twice, not super impressed with, and then don't go the distance with. I want these to be rods that I'm extremely comfortable with, I'm extremely confident with, and I feel good about these picks. So that's the criteria here. 4 rods to make my personal Mount Rushmore of bass fishing rods that I've ever used. So let's get started here. The first rod that I'm going to pick here, we're going to start off with a very expensive rod, and then we're going to work our way down the budget escalator. So the first rod probably comes as no shock to anybody that's truly fished with me a lot out there on the water or talked to me me about my honest, day-to-day setups, there's really only two very expensive rods that I own, like extremely high-end, hurt me to purchase, and this is one of those. This rod, I can confidently say, is the best spinning rod that I have ever used, period. End of discussion. It is my GOAT of spinning rods. Now, when you see the price, you're going to say, well, yeah, it obviously better be for that amount of money. And folks, I'm here to tell you that it is. It pains me to say this. It pains my wallet to say this. I bought this rod just like everybody else does, and borderline had to call my bank to make sure that they let this payment go through and didn't mark it as fraud. But it is the one and only G. Loomis NRX Plus 872S. That's the rod. Gun to my head, one spinning rod for the rest of my life. It's the NRX Plus 872S. This rod is 7'3". It's a medium, it's an extra fast, and it's a rod from Loomis that's rated at 1/8 to 3/8 of an ounce for the baits that it can handle. It's got a split cork handle. It's got that matte black finish on the rod with the aqua sort of rod wrapping and accents on it. This rod is the real deal. And when we talked a couple weeks ago about like made in the USA rods, this rod is actually made in the USA. It's made in Woodland, Washington. It uses an American-made blank rolled with that Spiral X technology, scary light rod when you put it in your hand. It's got a very light, comfortable CI4 Plus reel seat. It's just what a very high-end spinning rod should be and what it should feel like. Now, what makes this rod so special? Well, the big thing for me on this rod is going to be sensitivity. This is the most sensitive spinning rod that I have ever owned, and I feel like I almost have like underwater vision when I'm working something along the bottom with this rod. I can feel the difference between, bottom compositions, between finicky bites and ticks of rocks, everything that you're sitting up above the water trying to decipher while you're fishing bottom baits, I just feel like is easier with this rod, especially with those lighter finesse techniques where it makes it harder, right? Versus dragging a big, ball and chain Carolina rig or a heavy Texas rig or something where you have more weight to help you feel that. A lot of times with these light bait techniques, that's a little bit harder to feel. With this rod, it just makes it easier. So 7'3" is that perfect length for me as well. It's longer than a 7 foot or a 7'1", so you get that extra casting distance, but it's shorter than like a 7'5" or up, right? Which is a little tough for tight quarters. It's a little tough for the kayak. This is just that happy medium. Now, the only downside of this rod, I'd say there are probably two. I would say one, obviously, is the price because it retails for $650. Now, here's going to be my word of advice. I'm going to try and not get myself in trouble here, so if I do, I apologize. And G. Loomis or whoever, if you're listening to this, plug your ears, but we keep it real with you guys here on this show. That's my goal. So I am just going to say that if you are not getting some sort of discount on an NRX Plus, don't buy it. Now, are you going to get like half off or something? No, of course not. But if you're checking out and you're buying this rod for $650 retail, stop what you're doing, stop the checkout process, pull up Instagram, type in Tackle Talk Podcast, and DM me. Seriously, that's all I can say about this. I'm probably legally not allowed to say anything else. There's a lot of rules behind a lot of this stuff, but the OG folks know most people are not paying straight retail for rods of that price and that caliber. There's always someone out there that's willing to work with you, just maybe not publicly, and all you have to do is ask. It does not hurt to ask. That's all I'm going to say there. DM me if you have any questions or any help. I'm not going to get us in any more trouble here, but I want to kind of bridge this line, and I want to be honest with you all. If you're looking for a rod like that and you don't have some sort of, hookup or some sort of person willing to help, email me, DM me, reach out to me, and I will try my best to help you, because there are a lot of ways that you can make sure that you are at least not paying full retail for that rod. That's all I'm going to say there. The other downside to this rod are those dang recoil guides. Now, they're a great idea. I'll give you that. This is a rod that has those guides that you can like bend and then boom, they flick right back into place. So they're really hard to break. They're very durable, but I've had a lot of problems with that line, especially that really thin braid, which is getting more and more popular these days, getting caught in those guides. I'd rather just have regular guides with like ceramic inserts or something like that and take the chance of just breaking them eventually and fixing them versus these recoil guides. And that's why I actually like the new GLX rods that G Loomis came out with because they're very, very close to an NRX, but a little bit cheaper, and they have normal guides on them, so kind of a win in that book for the new GLXs. But this is going to be my number one rod on my Mount Rushmore here, the G Loomis NRX Plus 872S, in my opinion, the GOAT of spinning rods. Okay, now let's move to rod number 2 in our Mount Rushmore of fishing rods here, and this is going to be a little bit more attainable for most folks, coming in at not $650 like the first rod. This is at least more manageable at $279 retail, and this is going to be the Shimano X Pride B, specifically the EXC 610MB. So this is a 6'10" medium power rod. It's got a moderate fast action, and it's rated for 1/4 ounce to 3/4 of an ounce for the baits that you can throw on it. So just like that last rod was the best overall spinning rod that I've ever used in my life, this rod, I will go on record in saying, is my favorite jerkbait and topwater rod on the market today. Of all the brands, of all the models, of all the price points, this is the one. This is the rod that I've fallen in love with as my primary jerkbait rod, even over rods that are like 2 times the price. So this has that same CI4 Plus reel seat that the NRX just had that we talked about, although obviously this is a casting rod, not a spinning rod, so there's a little difference there. But it's got the carbon monocoque handle on it, cork where your hand sits on the handle, so that's nice. And then this really sleek kind of black butt end to the rod. All black rod, again, how a high-end fishing rod should look. This is a classy rod from the aesthetic side, but where this rod really shines is the combination of power and action. So sure, it's sensitive, but that's not really what I'm using this rod for. It's not really what I would say anyway this rod is made to do, because with jerkbaits and topwaters, sensitivity isn't my primary objective like it would be with a bottom bait rod. The most important characteristics of a jerkbait rod to me are balance and comfort in your hand and the action of that rod as a whole. This rod checks both of those boxes flawlessly. You've got 6 foot and 10 inches worth of rod to work with, so it's long enough to get good casts out of like a lighter, 110 or 110 junior style bait, but it's short enough for regular dudes like me to work it at that sort of downward angle comfortably without having to angle it, all the way out to avoid hitting the boat or the water or the ground or things like that. So 610 is kind of that perfect length for me anyway for a jerkbait stick. But then when this rod loads up both on the back cast and when you're leaning into a fish, it's got that slightly more parabolic bend that you need there, but it has enough backbone to keep it from feeling mushy. So you've probably had crankbait rods that are moderate and feel kind of mushy or limp when you get that full bend in it. For a crankbait, obviously not the end of the world. Sometimes that's great. That's what you want in a crankbait rod. But with jerkbaits, I want somewhere in the middle. I want that bend to be deep enough to not rip those trebles out when I do sweep into that fish, but stay fast and strong enough to get a forceful hook set into those fish on light line. And this is the best rod that I've found out there for that job to be able to do both. And it goes without saying, I guess, but since it's a great jerkbait rod, the best jerkbait rod that I've ever used, it also doubles as an awesome topwater rod, especially spooks, but poppers too, finesse buzz baits like the micro buzz, prop baits. It's a slick little topwater rod too, so don't overlook that part. But primarily, this is my top answer if you ask me for my recommendation for a jerkbait rod. As long as your budget allows for it, at $279, nothing, in my opinion, is going to beat this rod. So this rod comes in at number 2 on our Mount Rushmore of fishing rods, the Shimano X Pride B, the EXC 610MB. All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium batteries. And you guys know by now, over the past couple years, I've been running Dakota Lithiums on my kayak, for my motor, for my electronics. We run them on my buddy's boat for his trolling motor, and there is a reason why so many people, myself included, choose Dakota Lithium. They're twice the power of traditional batteries at half the weight. They charge up to 5 times faster. They last up to 4 times longer. They have 100% US-based customer support. support, and they come with a whopping 11-year warranty standard. All of that from the best in the business, one of the most widely trusted names in batteries, period, but especially in the marine lithium world, the top choice is Dakota Lithium. And right now you can go over to www.dakotalithium.com, and not only can you browse their huge selection of different batteries if you need 12 volt, 24 volt, 36 volt, all the way up. They've got about everything that you can imagine in the lithium world. They've got chargers, they've got solar packs, they've got power stations, anything you need for off-the-grid camping even. They've got a ton of stuff over there, but you can also use code TACKLETALK5. That's going to save you 5% off your entire purchase over at dakotalithium.com, and with lithium batteries, that makes a pretty big difference. So go use code TACKLETALK5 over at www.dakotalithium.com, the official lithium battery of Bassmaster. All right, folks, we are halfway through, and we're going to stay in that similar price range right now. About $20 cheaper than the X-Pride B is this next rod we're going to talk about, but this is a rod that I have mentioned on this show quite a few times, and I've affectionately referred to it as a unicorn rod. Just a specific model of rod in a larger lineup of rods from a rod maker, but for some reason, this one specific model just has something special to it, something that I can't quite put my finger on, but it clearly stands out amongst the other models in this lineup. And that's what we have here today, a unicorn rod. And that rod is going to be the Dobyns Champion XP DC 736 CB glass. Now, this rod, again, is 7 foot 3 inches long. It's listed as a heavy power and a fast action, but it's a crankbait-specific glass model, so that heavy and fast are both relative terms here. This is not like a flippin' stick. Don't get it twisted when you see heavy, fast. This is not something you're going to go out and punch with. This is a heavy, fast crankbait rod. So it's got a full cork handle, no split grip here. It is rated for 3/8 ounce to 1.5 ounces, and this rod, and I don't say this lightly, but again, this is Mount Rushmore, so there's going to be a lot of, best at X, or this is the best I've ever used for, insert technique here. But there should be a lot of that because this is an episode about the 4 best rods that I've ever used. So I'm going to say this type of thing a lot, but for this specific rod, this is the most versatile moving bait rod that I have ever owned. This rod is billed as a crankbait rod, and yes, it can handle crankbaits amazing, especially mid to deep divers. This is my rod. I throw DTs on this rod. I throw XDs on this rod. In the middle of summer, you will find me out in the middle of a lake somewhere deep cranking with this 736 CB glass rod, no question about it. But there are a lot of other rods out there that do deep diving crankbaits well as well. Where this rod really shines is chatterbaits. This is a magical chatterbait rod once you get used to it. And that's the key here, because if you've been throwing a chatterbait on a 7.3, medium or heavy fast rod or extra fast rod your whole life, and then you switch to this rod, it's gonna feel weird at first because this is a more moderate action, obviously, since it's a crankbait type blank. But if you throw a chatterbait in open water or even semi-open water and you're not ripping it through like really thick Florida weeds every day, this rod is special. It loads up and it casts like a dream. It really gives you a rod that holds its backbone well when something like, a half ounce or a 3/4 ounce chatterbait is really thumping down there and putting off a lot of resistance in the water. It holds that backbone really well, but then gives itself up and lets it load up further down when you actually do set the hook and lean into that fish once it bites. So I've lost a lot less fish on this setup because I have more play in that rod when that fish is penned, which has helped me, especially when I'm in something like my kayak. Now, you do have to lean into that fish just a little harder on the hook set sweep because it's not as fast and stout of an action if you're used to using a regular fast, but it's not much, and once you get used to it, it's worth it. And if that wasn't enough, this rod also is a sneaky good choice for like small swim baits and glide baits. So we're talking like the Clutch Eco that we discussed a few weeks ago, anything in that 5 to 6 inch glide bait territory, or big jointed swim baits too, like bull shads or 6 Sense traces. This rod handles those amazing. And then even for like bigger top waters, like your larger, heavier ploppers or choppos, if you go above that 90 size, this rod's great for those too. There's just very little in the moving bait category that this rod can't do well. But its ability to be a magical chatterbait rod and a lights out crankbait rod with a side of glides rods and swim baits and topwaters just makes it a jack of all trades that I think, while it got a lot of respect in the beginning, now, whether it's just not the cool new thing anymore or all the Dobyns drama or whatever, it's just kind of fallen out of favor a little bit, I feel like. But those that have one and those that have put in the time with it know how special this rod is. You can find people that will, again, preach until the cows come home about how great of a rod and how special of a rod model this specific rod is. So it comes in at number 3 here today, the Dobyns Champion XP 736 CB glass at $249 retail. Okay, folks, and that brings us to number 4 here today, and I promised you that there would be a sub $150 rod on this list, which is crazy to think about, an under $150 rod on our Mount Rushmore of bass fishing rods, but it is worthy of the honor, I promise you. If you're an OG listener to this show, you probably have, I'd say, like an 80% chance of guessing what rod I'm about to say. I have preached the good word of this specific make and model for a long time. I'm going to guess probably 5 or 6 years at this point. To anyone that will listen, this is the best under $150 rod that I think you can buy. I still believe that. It's the Dobyns Fury 735C. And I really don't think it's hyperbole when I say that this is the best budget rod out there. The 735C and the Fury line from Dobyns is a 7'3" mag heavy, fast action casting rod. So a rod that I would probably call my whoopin' stick. This is it. It retails for $129.99. And it is worth every darn penny. This rod has been my primary frog rod since before I even started doing Tackle Talk, and I'm still using the exact same rod with no issues. I've seen this rod do unthinkable things time and time again, and I just shake my head when I remember that it only cost me $129. I mean, if you want like a real quick story, I caught a 4.5 pound largemouth on a buzzbait before I even knew what I was doing in the kayak. It hit right at the boat. I boat flipped it. I missed grabbing that fish when I swung it around. And so this 4.5 pounder is just dangling in front of me with this Dobyns 735C completely doubled over. I was just high sticking this big bass right in front of me, swinging it around, and it didn't snap. It was incredible. My buddy that was right beside me was like, how in the world is that rod still in one piece? And it's not only still in one piece, I'm still using that rod today, hundreds and hundreds of fish later, with zero issues. The durability on this rod is staggering, at least the specific rod that I have in my possession, and I've heard it time and time again from other people. I don't think it's a fluke. I think this is just how these rods are built. But it's a mag heavy, which is obviously more like a regular heavy. For other rod brands, Dobyns runs a size light a lot of times, but this isn't just a frog rod. It's also a great flip and jig rod or a punching rod. I've thrown A-rigs on this rod before. I've thrown glides on this rod before. Anything in that upper end of regular bass fishing where you need sort of a meat stick to do it, for $129, you're not going to find a better option, I promise you. And as beefy as this rod is, it balances exceptionally well. That's always been Gary Dobyns' calling card, has been balance, which again is important if you've got something like a frog rod that's going to be in your hand all day long, working at that downward angle over pads or weeds or things like that. I've also had great hookup ratios with this rod the entire time that I've owned it. And again, it's durable enough that I can winch those fish out of the nastiest stuff without worrying about failure. This rod is made for the thick stuff. But if you're not around thick stuff and you want to throw like, a mag draft around open water or a 6 or 7 inch bull shad around, just like other rods on this list, this rod is not a one-trick pony. I mean, shoot, if you're one of those people that likes a heavier all-around rod, it probably wouldn't surprise me if there are people out there who just like this rod for regular Texas rigs or regular jigs. I wouldn't doubt that one bit, especially if you're a braid guy. But at the end of the day, this is the rod that I keep shaking my head at year after year after year, knowing what I have seen this rod do and then knowing what I paid for it. Is it the fanciest rod? No. Is it the prettiest rod? No. But will it do its main job, frogging, and a lot of other jobs too, better than anything else in this price range? I say yes. So it's on our list, rounding out our Mount Rushmore of fishing rods, the Dobyns Fury FR 735C. So there you have it, folks. Our Mount Rushmore is set with all 4 rods. First, we have the G Loomis NRX Plus 872S. Then we have the Shimano X Pride B, which is the EXC 610MB. We have the Dobyns Champion XP DC 736 CB Glass. And last, we have the Dobyns Fury FR 735C. I feel really good about that list. And as always, if you have any questions about any of these specific rods, feel free to email me at tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com or shoot me a DM on Instagram or Facebook at Tackle Talk Podcast. I'll be happy to help. But folks, that brings us to the end of today's show and our Mount Rushmore. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know. Do you agree with our Mount Rushmore of rods or do you disagree? If you disagree, what are your top 4 rods? I'd love to hear them. Shoot me an email or a comment or a DM and let the banter begin. But as always, I appreciate you guys spending your Tuesday with us here at Tackle Talk. It means the world. You guys are the best. As always, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you listen to podcasts. Quick reminder, we still have a few mugs and I've got some shirts and wristbands and keychains and all that stuff over on the website, tackletalkpodcast.com. Just click store at the top of the page. If you've already ordered, those orders already have arrived or are currently in the mail on their way to you. Again, can't thank you guys enough for the support. It helps us here a lot more than you realize. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, we will see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2019. For more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.